At exactly noon, on a blood-soaked October day in AD 52, 19,000 condemned men lowered their weapons and waited for mercy. Water sloshed red against the sides of burning ships. Exhausted fighters, criminals, rebels, prisoners of war, stood knee-deep in the artificial sea. They had survived hours of naval combat. They had obeyed every order. Above them, the Emperor's purple-draped viewing box cast a long shadow across the water. They had performed the ritual perfectly.
Morituri te salutant.
Those who are about to die salute you. The words had echoed across the basin that morning. Now swords slipped from trembling hands. Shields splashed into crimson water. The men had given Rome its spectacle. Now they waited for their pardons. Then the horns sounded. Not the gentle notes of mercy. The harsh call to resume combat. Panic rippled through thousands of throats as Praetorian archers along the arena walls raised their bows. Arrows were nocked. The Emperor's promise had been theater, just another act in the show. Guards began firing into the mass of men who, moments earlier, believed they had earned their lives. There was nowhere to run, no shore to reach, no exit not blocked by spears. Only the final entertainment value of betrayal. The water filled again with bodies. Ships burned. Men screamed. Some tried to surrender, raising empty hands. Others tried to swim toward the walls, only to be struck down by arrows. Above them, tens of thousands of spectators watched in silence, then in excitement. What had begun as a staged naval battle had turned into a massacre. And still the Emperor watched. Rome called this entertainment. But Rome had not always been this way. Centuries earlier, before the arenas, before the massive crowds, before the emperors turned death into spectacle, there had only been a funeral. A bronze sword scraped against stone as the first gladiator in Roman history collapsed. It was 264 BC. A nobleman named Decimus Junius Brutus was burying his father. The old man lay on a pyre, wrapped in expensive cloth, surrounded by weeping relatives. But Decimus had prepared something special. His munus, his duty to the dead. 6 slaves stood before the pyre. They were not professional fighters. They were not criminals. They were household servants. Men who had likely worked side by side for years. Men who had eaten the same bread, slept in the same quarters, and shared the same lives. Now they held swords. Fight, Decimus commanded. Honor my father with your blood. The mourners shifted uneasily. Human sacrifice was barbaric. That was something the Carthaginians did. That was something the Eastern kings did. Romans were civilized. But this was different. This was not sacrifice. This was a contest. 2 men stepped forward. They hesitated. The crowd leaned closer. One raised his shield. The other lunged clumsily. The first blood soaked into the dust. The spectators gasped. And then, something unexpected happened. They cheered. The violence, framed as honor, suddenly felt acceptable. Even thrilling. It was not murder, they told themselves. It was tradition. It was duty. It was spectacle. From that moment, the idea spread. Funeral games became more elaborate. Instead of 6 fighters, there were 20. Then 50. Then 100. Families competed to host the most impressive displays. Death became a language of prestige. By the time Rome conquered the Mediterranean, the funeral games had escaped the funerals. Politicians realized something powerful. If blood could impress a few hundred mourners, imagine what it could do for thousands of voters. Ambitious men began hosting gladiatorial games not to honor the dead, but to win elections. The arenas grew larger. The fighters became more skilled. Specialized schools opened to train them. These schools were called ludi, and inside them men were transformed. A new recruit entered as a prisoner, a slave, or a criminal. His name was taken away, his past erased. He was given a number, a weapon, and a strict routine. He woke before dawn. He trained for hours. He ate a special diet of barley and beans designed to build fat over muscle, creating a layer that protected vital organs. The Romans called gladiators horderii, barley men. They were taught how to fight, how to fall, how to bleed without dying. Their instructors were often retired gladiators, men with scars like maps across their bodies. Discipline was absolute. Disobedience meant whipping. Desertion meant death. And yet some men volunteered, because a successful gladiator could become a celebrity. Crowds would chant his name. Women would scratch love notes into the arena walls. Victorious fighters earned money, gifts, even freedom. But for every champion, dozens died anonymously in the sand. As the Republic turned into an empire, the games grew more extravagant. Julius Caesar staged battles with hundreds of fighters at once. Exotic animals were shipped from Africa: lions, elephants, rhinoceroses. Entire forests were recreated inside the arena, only to be soaked in blood by sunset. But the true transformation came with the emperors. For them, the games were not just entertainment. They were politics. An emperor who gave the people food and spectacles could keep the peace. Bread and circuses, the poet Juvenal called it. If the people were fed and entertained, they would not revolt. So the emperors competed with one another to host the most shocking, the most unforgettable, the most impossible spectacles Rome had ever seen. And none were more obsessed with spectacle than Emperor Claudius. He wanted something Rome had never witnessed before. Not a battle in the arena, not a hunt, not a duel. He wanted a war. So he ordered the construction of an artificial sea. At Lake Fucine, engineers built platforms, stands, and towers around the water. Thousands of workers reshaped the shoreline. Massive wooden ships were constructed, real warships, armed and crewed. But the men on those ships were not soldiers. They were condemned criminals. 19,000 of them. Some were murderers. Some were rebels. Some were prisoners of war. Some had simply angered the wrong official. They were given armor, weapons, and orders. Fight until the enemy is destroyed. On the day of the spectacle, crowds poured in from across Italy. The emperor's platform rose above the water like a throne over an ocean of death. Trumpets sounded. The ships moved into position. Two fleets faced one another across the artificial sea. Then the condemned men raised their voices together.
Morituri te salutant.
Those who are about to die salute you. It was not tradition. It was not ritual. It was a desperate plea, disguised as respect. Some accounts say the emperor replied casually, as if they were already dead. The signal was given. The ships surged forward, or splashed. Grappling hooks flew. Flames climbed the sails. Men hacked at one another on rocking decks. Some fell into the water and drowned under the weight of their armor. Others were burned alive as ships caught fire. The battle lasted for hours. By noon, the water was thick with bodies. The survivors, bloody, exhausted, terrified, finally stopped fighting. They had done everything the emperor asked. They had performed the spectacle. So they lowered their weapons. They waited, but the horns sounded again. The order was clear. Continue fighting. When the men refused, archers along the walls raised their bows. Arrows fell into the crowded water like rain. Panic exploded across the basin.
Men scrambled for shields.
Others tried to swim. Many simply stood frozen, unable to believe what was happening. The emperor had no interest in mercy, only in the show. And so the massacre continued until the artificial sea was silent.
Rome applauded.
For the spectators, it had been unforgettable. For the emperor, it had been a triumph. For the 19,000 men in the water, it had been something else entirely. It had been the moment they understood what Rome truly was. An empire that could build roads across continents. Aqueducts that carried water for miles. Cities of marble and gold. And arenas where human beings were reduced to props in someone else's performance. Because in Rome, death was not just punishment. It was policy. It was politics. It was entertainment. And as long as the crowds kept cheering, the blood kept flowing.